Mitch, I really have to discuss this roast thing. Larry has sent me an email every day for the last 6 months saying, this is not a roast, this is a celebration. You are not to say anything nasty about me. Am I right? Right. He says, and Maria will kill you if you say anything bad about me. Okay? I mean, I'm really, I don't know what to do. He's told me I can't say anything nasty about him. I have a lot at stake here. Actually, my son works there, and he could be out of the job by the end of the evening. Well, is Sabina here? Sabina? We are, hello? Oh, she's getting her dinner. In that case, let me roast Larry for a little while. I will tell you. Here comes Sabine. Sabine is going to present the Team Scotland, the North Sportsmanship Award for their courage in conceding to a team that had some, shall we say, nefarious players on it. And, oh, goodness, you looking lovely. With Roy. Roy, you're a lucky man. Okay. It's named after one of our greatest bridge players, Sidney Lazard, who donated this wonderful trophy. And Sabina will have a couple of words about Team Scotland. She's got a 4-page speech, so we should be back.
Can you turn up the mic? We can barely hear you. And that's amazing when it's you, David.
Turn off the mic. Well,
Louder.
not my problem.
All right, can you hear me? Okay. So you all know the story. After decades of using black magic to steal medals, titles, and trophies from the rightful winners, the dark bridge wizards were finally brought to justice. The code of their dark spells was cracked, and the worst perpetrators were expelled from the realm of the bridge world with the verdict of guilty by the Ministry of Bridge. After several years of peace, a storm began to brew on the horizon. He who must not be named has found a legal court that could not see his wrongdoing and overruled the bridge courts. Let's not be afraid of calling him by his name anymore. Voldemort was back. He was back to compete in the European qualifier event for the World Championships. There was a big commotion in the bridge world. Voldemort was not welcome. But there was nothing that could be done. He was allowed to compete. Every player and every team faced a dilemma. It was possible to withdraw from the event. But that would mean giving up the chance to represent one's country in the World Championship. A very high price to pay. And so, Monday, the 23rd of August came around. The clock struck 10. And Voldemort sat down in his chair in front of his computer, ready to take on his first prey, the team of Scotland. Then the unprecedented and unexpected happened. There was no one in the opposing chairs. Not at 10, not 15 minutes later, not for the entire match. The news spread like wildfire, and everybody was speculating as to what was going on. Voldemort shrugged it off and sat down for the second match to take on Wales. But the same thing happened again. The opposing chairs remained empty. Then Slovenia, then Lithuania, then Ukraine. Nobody showed up. The resounding message could be heard all over the world. Cheats are not welcome. Not knowing the repercussions, facing potential disqualification from the event, and sanctions by their own bridge federations. All of these countries showed an incredible amount of courage with their act of civil disobedience. They all deserve our utmost admiration. All the other countries followed in their footsteps. Voldemort never clicked a single bit or card in the entire event. All of Europe had united to protect the integrity of the game that we all love so much. It wouldn't have happened if Team Scotland hadn't shown the way. Alex Adamson, Jim Hay, Derek Peden, Stephen Peterkin, Samantha Punch, Derek Sanders, and NBC Ann Perkins. I don't know how you did it. I imagine there must have been long discussions between the team members. And maybe not everyone agreed on what finally materialized. But in the end, you stood united in your fight for justice. And you made the bridge vote a better bridge vote. I cannot possibly imagine a more deserving recipient of the Sportsmanship of the Year award. Okay, so there are 2 team members present tonight. They are a long-standing partnership and can often be found on the top of the rankings. I hear that Stephen Peterkin plays the piano even better than he plays bridge, if that is possible at all. And his partner, Professor Samantha Punch, is well known as the driving force behind BAMSA, the Bridge Mind Sport organization that does academic research in the field of bridge. And she also won the IPPA Book of the Year award with her bestseller, Bridge at the Top, Behind the Scenes, a collection of interviews with several top players. Sam and Steve, would you please come to the stage?
very much. Over to Sam.
As you can see, Stephen's the chatty one of the team. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Team Scotland, and we'd like to start by thanking Sabina, because Sabina and her partner, Sabina Alken, and her partner, Roy Welland, were due to play in that same event with us. But they immediately withdrew from the European qualifiers as soon as they heard that one of the teams had controversially changed their lineup. Sabina and Roy were thus an inspiring example for Team Scotland deciding to take action. So in many ways, their action was not courageous enough. Certainly as a team, we were greatly surprised but also honoured to receive this award. We just happened to be the first team up to play that day, and we're sure that many other players would have done the same in our position. In a way, we were just in the right place at the right time, or not, according to the TDs. In fact, we were in our beds. The first match was at 9 o'clock that morning, so we're getting an award for having a long night. Seriously though, we were just in a lucky position to be able to take a stance. And from our point of view, it was time for the players to act. The organisations had tried, but their hands were tied. And Team Scotland felt strongly that whilst we did risk disrupting the European qualifiers, there was an even greater risk that if action wasn't taken by the players, the Bermuda Bowl would be even more disrupted. At the time then, it didn't seem a brave thing to do, it was just the right thing to do. And certainly during the event, it was really exciting seeing the other players feel the same. We would like to thank all 29 other countries for following suit. In particular, followed us, Wales, Slovenia, Lithuania and Ukraine, who set the way for others to follow. And by the end of the event, as Sabina said, it felt like the bridge community had sent a clear message that it's not okay for a deviant player to represent their country again so soon. Bridge is a mind sport, and cheating just shatters the problem-solving element of the game. The chair of the Scottish Bridge Union, Alan Goodman, provided a brief statement for today. He says, "It's a great honour to receive an award that recognises and celebrates sportsmanlike behaviour. We're very proud of our team and the brave stance they took." At the European qualifiers, players were very proud of national bridge organisations who wrote letters of support. And as a team, we've been overwhelmed by the level of support we've had from countries around the world, including many of you in this room. In fact, we were very touched during the event when a public letter of support was sent from many top players from here in the US and in Canada, and that was very much appreciated at the time. So whilst we've received much international support, we're also aware that some disagreed with the action that we took. In particular, there's concern that it could set a dangerous precedent. However, we'd like to stress that our action was as a result, as Sabina has said, of a unique set of circumstances that involved almost 2 decades of deviant behaviour at the highest level of the game, and it also included denial, and that denial resulted in costly legal action that took limited resources away from our mind sport. We certainly do not condone others to do the same against deviant players. This was a specific and unique time in bridge history, and it pointed to the players to act as a last resort. Team Scotland are extremely delighted, as I'm sure all of you, that cheating is now being taken seriously by bridge organisations around the world. New policies and procedures are in place. Now, in terms of next steps, another dark side of our game needs to be addressed. It would be great if gender inequalities within our bridge community could also be taken as seriously as cheating, with new measures to address inclusivity. But perhaps we better leave that discussion for another day. Many thanks once again to the board and for all your support in giving the integrity of the bridge.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Congratulations. And congratulations to the committee on their fine choice. The committee was Steve Beatty, Zia, and Stevie Weinstein. Okay. Thank you, Team Scout. As you can see late in our program, we're going to be presenting a lot of people who are no longer with us. Sadly, we've lost, since our last meeting 2 or 3 years ago, we've lost many people, many Hall of Famers, Lynn, Deas, Beth Palmer, John Sutherlin, Eddie Cantor, Jackie Mitchell comes to mind. And today, sadly, we lost Rita Seaman, one of the First Ladies of Bridge, at least in South Florida. Our condolences to all of them. I hope I'm not missing anybody. Okay, time for a director call. Solly, you're going to be up. But first, we have to introduce Doug Rowe to introduce Solly. Solly, I go back so many years with Solly in New York. I always thought he was Harry Goldwater's kid. But I learned that wasn't the case. Solly had a way of diffusing any situation, the best director there could possibly be. So Doug Rowe, would you please come up and introduce Solly?
Good evening. Weinstein, ACBL National Tournament Director. Indeed, Solly is a very accomplished tournament director. Yet to fully describe his contribution to the game, that title alone is an insufficient bid if there ever was one. Do take a moment when you get a chance to read the sketch of Sol's career in your program. Unless you know him very well, you're sure to find an endeavor there that you didn't know he was involved in. You'll note right away that Sol began directing 12 games in 1967, and he worked his first world championship in 1976. That's less than a decade. That's an astonishing accomplishment. How was he able to do that? I got my answer from others who know Sol well, colleagues, tournament organizers, expert players. These are the descriptions they gave to me of Sol. Relentless in trying to get things right. Possessing an extraordinary breadth of knowledge. Competent, reliable, committed to player and director education. He didn't fall into these compliments by accident. He developed his work ethic early in his career and applied it day after day after day. The consistency paid off in how much he accomplished. Sol ran regionals all up and down the East Coast, but particularly in the Northeast. And the tournament managers for whom he worked all concurred, often in nearly identical words, that Sol ran his regionals in a way that made it much less stressful for them. The tournament chair never had to worry about any of the operational details of the events. Sol was a master at conquering the logistical challenges of any tournament space. His meticulous planning avoided snafus that might have occurred so as to free him to deal effectively with any that did crop up. Tournament chairs simply trusted Sol to get the job done right, and they weren't disappointed. In the first 2 decades of ACBL sport during the 80s and 90s, Sol was the client for its development. By that, I mean that he was the liaison between the field staff and the office programmers. When the program was in its infancy, it was little more than a matchboarding engine. Sol identified the tasks that we needed the program to do. He articulated default settings, default warnings. Under his leadership, dozens of functions that calculated master points, fixing broken movements, scoring Swisses, many others were added. Each process required careful testing. Sol sought input from teams around the country and then had to work out which were operator errors and which were truly program deficiencies. The underlying algorithms of that program still remain intact and are used daily by clubs, hundreds of clubs around the country. Solly is proud of the guidance that he provided to ACBL's earliest efforts in electronic scoring, and he should be. Particularly in high-level events, Sally is always aware of the necessity of getting the tough rulings correct. I talked to one expert who noticed early in his career that he was asking the right questions and consulting with the best people. Sal knows that the expert community plays at the highest level, that we must have their expertise. He identified those experts most likely to have the most thoughtful opinions, the skill to express them clearly, and the ability to help him expand the envelope to consider all the ramifications of the rulings. That brings me to the USBF team trials and the cavendish events. Sal worked these events for more than 3 decades and was in charge of them. He thrived on these events. Every tournament we run is important, but there's obviously a qualitative difference in the field of these events. When international reputation and representation or a substantial cash purse is at stake, it's all the more important that we get the rulings right. Sally was up to that challenge. It's no surprise that somebody who was as driven towards excellence as Sally is, that he wasn't necessarily cracking jokes every other round. Yet in the midst of his efforts, a droll sense of humor would crop up from time to time. There was a midsummer tournament in the midst of a heat wave, and we were already having trouble keeping the water stations full and the event continued to start. When Sally started the room, he assured the players that the convention center was fixing the drought. We were playing in a windowless tennis court. A few rounds later, a storm arose, and suddenly play was interrupted by this incredibly loud pounding of rain on the metal roof. And Sal just sauntered over to the microphone and said, "Will you ask for more water?" A colleague who came from a family of educators told me how much he appreciated Sally's willingness to teach. But we agreed there was a caveat. Sal does not suffer well those who come to the conversation thinking they already know it. Sal can be particularly irate if you create a mess when you had a chance to confirm your plan of action and chose not to do so. But for those who want to learn, Sal is here to teach. There was a young part-time director who worked for Sal in New York for several years and then moved elsewhere. About a year after that, I had a conversation with a long-tenured colleague from the city where she relocated. The colleague remarked about a half dozen of tasks and responsibilities that Sal's protege had been permitted to learn and do despite her inexperience. He also mentioned that he hadn't gotten to do a lot of those things yet. Sal is strict in his teaching. The methods that he teaches arise from years of thoroughly vetted institutional knowledge. A few tournament procedures have alternative methods, but he relies on his experience to teach what he knows works best. That's not to say that Sal won't change with the times as our procedures evolve, but sometimes he needs a little push to get there. Sal has commendable empathy for less experienced players. The example that sticks in my mind came when a less experienced player arrived in our office very upset because she didn't understand the previous day's ruling. Her own explanation demonstrated that she had gotten the correct ruling. She had unauthorized information and used it to her advantage. But this younger player just didn't understand why that was illegal in our rules. It took several false starts, but Sal didn't give up until he found the precise set of words to enrich her understanding, even though I'm still sure she wasn't happy with the ruling. Sal achieved many other successes, although not a member of the Laws Commission, who carefully contributed ideas and opinions to those who were. He served as management representative to committees of the Board of Directors, most notably on the subjects of competition, conditions of contest, and the Master Point Award system. These remarks would be incomplete without a personal reflection. I first worked with Sal in 1983. I am grateful for the many years we collaborated in countless regionals. But I'm especially appreciative that he asked me to be his second in charge at the summer NABCs from 98 to 2011. That experience taught me so much, and it cemented a friendship that will last a lifetime. How did we survive 12 days of the stress of such an MABC? Part of that relates to our internal clocks. If you want a cogent answer from me, ask before the evening gets too late. In contrast, don't question Sally before noon if you can avoid it. We are the quintessential morning and night personalities, and that's part of what made us a good team. We trusted each other's decisions. I always knew that Sally had my back. As you know, this Black Report is given to people who have the vision to improve the ACBL in a host of different endeavors. And it's given to people whose accomplishments endure over the years. Sal clearly meets these criteria. The lyricist for the Broadway show Wicked captures this very succinctly. His words were shared between two characters in the drama. But if you think about them as between the ACBL and Sally, they surely belong. Through a career of accomplishments that continues still today, Sal changed us for the better, and he changed us for good. It is my high honor to present to you for induction into the Hall of Fame my colleague and my friend, Sal Weinstein.
Doug, who was the guy you were talking about? Well, I was told that I would have 7 minutes of speaking time. There's no way I can talk about myself for 7 minutes. It's not gonna happen. I'd like to thank the Hall of Fame Committee for this great honor. Unlike my fellow inductees, the players who knew they were going to be in the Hall of Fame, just didn't know which year. I was totally shocked by this selection, but pleasantly surprised. I'd like to thank my first bridge friends. I knew quickly that I was not going to be the type of player they were going to be. They were Eric Kokas, George Middleton, Henry Kukoff, and some others, and I wasn't going to be like them. We went to tournaments together. They went to play, and I went to direct. And being with them, I met and became friends with lots of top players. So I felt comfortable going to those people to ask for bridge help with rulings. That's the best thing a tournament director can do, get expert advice. Thank you, all of you experts, who are always willing to help. I've worked pretty much everything since running the college games. I've worked sectionals, regionals, nationals since 1970, WBF events, team trials since the 80s to Cavendish. I want to thank the many friends I've had as fellow directors over the years, some of whom are no longer with us. Johnny Weiser, Maury Bronstein, Harry Goldwater, Millard Knightley, Henry Kukoff, and those who are still with us, Chris Patriots, Charlie McCracken, Matt Smith, my co-inductee up here from Heaven Phoenix, and of course, Doug Rowe. I also would like to thank my oldest friend Charlie and his lovely wife Debbie for coming to share this evening with me. Thank you, Charlie. And the person who deserves the greatest thanks is my wife, Anne. She has put up with the directing lifestyle of travel and late hours for so many years. That was really something. Thank you, Anne. I love you. And thank you all. Time for the next round.
That was very well deserved. Let me point out, in case anybody has any complaints about the seating of this bingo, Mr. Weinstein is in charge of the ACBL. You can reach to that table over there. If you don't like your seat, talk to him. Just saying. Okay, it's Bill Cohen, Cowboy. Where are you, Bill?
I remember you.
Hello? Am I missing something? Oh, here he comes. Bill will induct his wife. Yes? Whatever you call her. They were a couple for more years than I'd like to imagine. Another way. Sorry. Pardon me. I got it wrong. Okay, I've been drinking. So many companies help me. Okay, at any rate, Beth is getting the Von Zedowitz Award from her longtime partner, Bill Cohen, and one of Washington's and the country's finest players.
Beth started her current playing career while she was at the University of Maryland Law School.
Fire!
Okay, how's this? Is this good? Okay. Beth first started playing cards at the University of Maryland Law School, where she was the first female student president. When she wasn't studying, she was working on her administrations. She started playing cards. People told me then she was the hardest worker there. She concentrated very well, and she won all the time. I met Beth a year or so after that, and we went out and played in a couple of club games. She had 18 master points. And we went out and played, and then we entered the Washington Bridge League sectional. There were several now ACBL Hall of Fame players in the sectional. All the best players in Washington played in it at the time. And it was a two-session event, and there was no flight concept back then. She nearly won the sectional when she first played. I had 200 points, she had 18 points. Wow. Now, after the game, we went over the boards. I couldn't remember there were no hand records. I couldn't remember what happened on a whole lot of these hands. But she knew, went board by board by board, and the hands told her a story, which I found fascinating for someone who just started to play. She could write a hand record, not all the spot cards, but all the honor cards, and she knew the story that each hand played. Now, like a lot of people, I went back and reflected upon the experience when I left, and I thought about it that night. And there was things that I found that I observed that turned out to be part of her career. She had this incredible ability to concentrate, but she did not want to adrenaline while she was concentrating, which I would later realize led to her to consistent play. She didn't drop hardly any tricks. If she dropped tricks that first time we played, I didn't notice it. Now remember, I was a new player too, but I didn't notice the tricks she was dropping. Now, in the bidding, she had a 6-5 hand, 6-5 on one hand, a hand that you would have thought someone who was playing as well as she had would have been a slam ball, but she didn't visualize as well in the bidding. I found all these things very interesting. And we played all the local sectionals around then, and then a pivotal part of her life came. Lynn Deas and her boyfriend Norbert moved into the Washington area. We started playing on teams with them immediately, and Lynn and Beth became fast friends. They formed a bridge partnership together and decided to play together. Now, everybody wants to have a good bridge partnership, and everybody wants to get good at bridge. But that's not the real question of importance. The real question of importance is, what sacrifices are you willing to make to get good and to build a good partnership? Beth had a lot more time then, and she and Lynn were focused on being the best partnership they could be. They spent hours and hours and hours not only discussing partnership and building a bidding system, but discussing bidding concepts. And the exchange of ideas is the best way to learn always with your peer group. They went out and played in their first major event, which was the World Championships, and they got a silver medal in Bergen. For the next 40 years, Beth and Lynn, along with several of the other top women players, dominated women's bridge for 40 years in the United States. When she was playing with the top women players, Beth was very, very happy. She told me all the time she was lucky to have the teammates she had. She said they were supportive, they were tough as nails at the table, and she always had confidence in them. She felt the same way about the team captains that she had from Kathy Way in the 80s to Lynn Baker near the end. There were facets of Beth's skill set that she had an amazing skill for. She never provoked, never let out a turn, never missed short of her hand, never missed a bid. I mean, never. She made, as I said earlier, she made few card playing errors. Someone in the ACBL bulletin wrote she was an excellent declarer. I would not describe her as excellent declarer. I would describe it as careful and consistent. She guarded against the 4-1 breaks before she knew they were there. She had a hand very early in her bridge career where she had ace, king, queen, fifth, opposite too small. A hand you see in a bridge contract. She was in a suit contract. That was not the trump suit. And she didn't cash the ace and the king. She cashed the ace and played a little bit. It's a hand I may have learned by seeing it in the bridge book. She worked this out because, not necessarily because she was highly skilled at card play, but because she was so careful at card play. Beth had her best successes, or some of her best successes at the end of her career. In 2017, the two-seeded team had beaten our team in the Grand National teams, and Beth and Sylvia were added to this two-seeded team. They came to the Nationals and played where they played a powerhouse Texas team and beat them by well over 50 innings. They then drew the Florida team that dominated the Grand Nationals for I don't know how many years. She had them beat until the last four, where she made a terrible bid, embarrassingly terrible bid. And she lost the match. Most people would have been crushed by that, but not Beth. She got herself together, she made the overall top 10 in the next two national events she played in, and then came the final weekend's Open Swiss. The Open Swiss was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, where the best players in the country were playing, and her team was up amongst the leaders from the third session all the way on. They were playing the top teams in the country. She played her best bridge. Going into the last round, her team had a 16 victory point lead, and they blitzed the last round, beating the team that had just won the Rising. 2 years after that, she played in the World Mixed Teams. This wasn't a normal World Mixed Teams. This was a large event, 104 teams it was. It was not up against any other national World Championship event. It was a standalone mixed event where her team started at the beginning going well and finished up in the end, where her team won the last three matches by large amounts of pins, the last two by a combined 85 pins. What Beth's goal was to be the best she could be. It wasn't just about winning, it was a lot more about being the best she could be, whether she was playing hearts in college, or playing bridge, or on her administrative role judge, or administrative judge she was. And for the federal government, she got awards for the work she did there. She also gave back the Bridge and Volunteer Awards. She was chairman of the women's part of the World Bridge of the USBF. She ran and sat on the C&E committees, especially the ones, and she only sat on the major ones because of her time constraints, but she sat on the ones locally that no one wanted facility. I'm just sorry that she passed away before she could get here to be honored, because like everybody else, all of us, we all want to be part of a community, and Beth loved being part of the Bridge community and appreciated her community of friends who came up here to honor her here today. And thank you very much.
Sorry, I had the wrong bill presenting, but, you know, when you get my age, you forget. I will say one thing. I never thought I would hear anyone speak and use the word Beth Palmer and past in the same sentence. But you live long enough, you hear everything. She was really quite the talented player. Okay, speaking for Mr. Past, Mike Pacella is up next, and if I make any more gaffes, he's taking over. So, please be kind to him. He will be presenting our friend, John Sutherlin.
Well, if I can't raise the microphone a little, I may have to have Steve Robinson take over. I've been fortunate enough in the past to give speeches introducing my best friends in the world to the Hall of Fame. And I just didn't think that was exactly appropriate tonight, so instead of a speech, I want to talk about what John Sutherlin meant to me in my life. I first met John in the mid-'80s, being introduced by the late, great Paul Soloway, because we had a mutual interest in wagering on sports. Little did I know that this was going to be the beginning of an over 4-decade friendship. I was really happy when John asked me to play bridge. I found out what an incredible player he was. He was one of the greatest declarers and an even better defender. But we won't talk about his bidding. John won 13 national titles, hundreds and hundreds of regionals, won the World Championship and 2 silver medals. He always told me his favorite thing he ever did was the second place finish with his wife Peggy in the World Mixed Pairs and Bayorettes. John, you can describe him, he was a tenacious and very, very tricky player. His best partnership was with Dan Morse, where he had most of his wins. I was a very often teammate of them and an opponent of them, and I think I did much better as a teammate than I did as an opponent over the years. So to give you an example of John's tenacity, I want to tell you a story that I was actually barred from telling, but I think he'll forgive me for telling it tonight. John went to a sectional in Waco, Texas, which was about 2 hours from Dallas, and he asked me to play on Saturday in the open pairs. So I drove down. The first session we did very well. The second session was going pretty well. In the last hand, John was at 3 clubs doubled. And we both knew that the event might be hinging on this, and John thought, and he thought, and he thought. Other tables were finishing, and the people were coming over and watching, and the directors, luckily it was before we had the late play penalties. The directors came over and they were yelling at him, they were going to give him a 0. So finally John looked up at me and he shrugged and he says, I can't figure out the squeeze for the overture, and he claimed his 9 points. So John took off to go home because he really wasn't, Peggy didn't allow him to drive after dark. But I stayed to get scores, and I think I gassed up and I was driving home about an hour away from Dallas. I see a car with flashes on the side of the road. And I take a look and I see John waving me down. So I quickly pull over and John runs up to my window and says, who had the 10 of spades on that last hand? John had come to visit us in Dallas quite frequently when they were living in the Bay Area and was thinking about moving. So, as all of us guys, we put off until Sunday, the day before he was leaving, got Nancy to get him an agent, look around the neighborhood for houses. So it was a driving rainstorm on Sunday. We looked at homes and John took off for Hawaii. So Monday night comes around and John calls from Hawaii and asks to speak to Nancy. And Nancy says, "What's up?" He says, "Well, remember that last house? I can't remember exactly what it looks like. Could you go look at it for me?" And Nancy says, "Sure, but why?" And he said, "Well, the agent told me that there was a lot of interest, so I bought it." That's how John and I became neighbors. John, as Betty can attest, was a bit of a hypochondriac. One day I get a call from him around 11 in the morning saying he had had heart palpitations and called the cardiologist at the hospital, and he wanted me to drive him there because he knew that he was about to have a heart attack. So I said, okay, so we drive to the hospital, and they see him, and the doctor tells him there's absolutely nothing wrong with him. John says, "You're wrong, I know there is. Is there some way we can check?" He said, "Well, we can do a procedure in the morning, but we have to go in through your leg, and we can put a scope up, and if something is wrong, we'll know." So John insists on doing it. So about 10 o'clock that night, John calls me and says he's really nervous about it. Will you come down and talk to the doctor when I come out, because I'll be a little groggy. So I meet him at the hospital at 5 a.m. John has his procedure. The doctor comes out, and John's resting, and I ask him how it went. And he rolled his eyes at me and said, "This was the biggest waste of time I've ever had." It's just a little emotional here with John. So I want to tell a couple of stories about John and Peggy. We can't do anything without involving Peggy because they were polar opposites, as Peggy often says. Whatever happened, none of us could figure it out, but it worked perfectly. John liked everything cold. Peggy liked everything warm. And still to this day, when Peggy comes to dinner, we have to take a couple of Diet Cokes out of the refrigerator and put them in the garage to get hot. One day, we're watching sports in the middle of the summer in John's office. It is just burning hot. He has a ceiling fan on and not much else. I say, "John, can we turn down the temperature a little?" John, being the king of the castle, the man of the house, turns to me and says, "You'll have to ask Peggy." So I got up to look for Peggy, and I see her walk by the room in a heavy sweater. So I turned around, sat back down, and sweated for the rest of the day. So years later, we go to a regional, of all places, called Ocean Shores, Washington. Playing a 3-story old schoolhouse. The knockouts are on the first floor. They're playing the pair games on the top. And John and Peggy were a little volatile in those days at the bridge table. And they had a few bad hands, I assume, and had a little bit of a spat. From here, the story is a little different from Peggy and from John. John claims that Peggy shoved him and he fell down a flight of stairs. Peggy's version was that she nudged him and he tripped. So dinner that night was quite quiet. I could see John plotting his revenge. So that night back in their hotel room, John waited until every midnight or 2 in the morning, woke up and he jumped up on the bed, started jumping up and down, screaming, "Earthquake, earthquake," knocked Peggy onto the floor. So John now foolishly thought they were even. However, in the morning he woke up, Peggy was gone, her clothes were gone, and a note that she had taken a taxi to the Greyhound station and gotten a bus back to San Francisco. Well, everything was great with John until 2004 when he had his first bout of cancer. And first it looked like everything was going well. I would take him for radiation treatment, and it was sure that we would do our usual power lunches. trying to decide whether it was worth it to him to even fight it. I told him better not tell Peggy that. So when John made up his mind to fight it, you've never seen anything like it. He was involved in a program that was so strong that no one had ever lasted over 4 months. John did it for 14 months and beat the rap. It looked like all was well. Unfortunately, it came back several times. And the last time, which was actually 12 years later, I believe it might have been 14 years later, when he was given much less time, he was in for an operation. Peggy and I were there early in the morning, and everything seemed to have gone well. And I took the afternoon shift with John, and we were talking. He got very, very tired. And he said, "It's time for you to leave." And as I was leaving, he called me over and whispered, because he was really tired. He says, "Can you get me down for 500 of the Cowboys?" It turned out this was the last time I spoke to John because complications, so we sort of started and ended our friendship exactly the same way. So anyway, I want to thank all of you for allowing me to talk about my good friend John. Thank you.
So Mike, we're running a little early here. Would you like to talk, to give maybe 10, 15 more minutes of stories?
How about his jokes?
How about a joke? I'm told.
No,
look,
Mike's jokes. They're always
Mike's
so
jokes.
terrible.
Mike, how about a joke? The crowd is too old to appreciate it. Well, you know, my kids are here. Later. Okay, well, we've had Beth Palmer, and it wouldn't be right to have Beth without her running mate, Lynn Deas, who will also be getting the Von Edwards Award, I think. And we have... She is getting in because she is getting in. And we have her friends, Doran and Marty, to present her. Are they here? What kind of name is Marty? The last name? Oh, Barb? It's Barb and Sherry. I'm sorry. I'm having a very tough night. Forget it. Oh. Do I know you? Please, please. My wife's over there. She's a very jealous type.
It's my turn. Yes. We'll wait for that. Okay, go here. Lynn and I were from Virginia Beach. We both started playing bridge at the same time. Lynn was in medical school, and I was a single mother of 3 children under the age of 4. Lynn and I were original bridge partners. When Lynn gave up medical school, I asked her to come and live with me and help me with my kids. She did. We played bridge during the day, at night, took care of the kids, Lynn taught. But what really changed our life at that time is that disco and happy hour came into being. Back in the 70s, who could even imagine living before happy hour? Well, some of you may recall that good bridge players made great backgammon players. And happy hour, for breaking the ice, they would have backgammon tables set up for happy hour. Well, Lynn was
healthy, and adorable. She started at one end of the room, I started on the other, and we had our hustle. Night after night, free food and money, a lot of it. In fact, it subsidized her teaching and it put me through graduate school. Well, that lasted for a while, but Lynn decided for love and bridge, not really in that order, she'd go to DC. The story's already been told. She left me as a partner for Beth Palmer. Really? Yes, really. And the history of bridge changed. I got to watch vicariously as Lynn and Beth and her team representing the U.S. World Championship after World Championship. Now her health had become very precarious. Lynn would play from a hospital bed. She'd play in a wheelchair. And for sure, the Grand Prix scooter that she would travel with all over the world, independently, never complaining, never with self-pity. She was a champion in bridge and, more importantly, in life. When I retired, the first person I called, well, maybe the second, was Lynn. I want to get back into bridge. Well, she was not only an amazing player, she was recognized as an extraordinary teacher. I am so thankful that she was aware that she was being inducted into the Hall of Fame. This was a lifelong dream for her, and it is my honor to be up here in her stead with Barb. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barb Bergen, and Bill actually told half the stories I wanted to tell, but it's probably impossible to separate Lynn from Beth. But stop. So I'll tell you about the Lynn who isn't rich. The Lynn who, when I went to visit her, and I woke up at what I considered a fairly early 8:30 in the morning, walked into the kitchen to find Lynn already barbecuing chicken, cooking corn on the cob, making potato salad. She assigned a fruit salad to me. She was having 20 people over, I had no idea. Actually on that same trip, when I first got to Lynn's house, she was playing in a regional. I had just come up. And I called to her from her house. And I'm sitting there and I look up at the ceiling and I went, oh my God, Lynn, your ceiling. She had the sky. She had the clouds, the sun. Oh, it was just so gorgeous. And she said, you know, no one has ever mentioned it to me. I designed it. Then the next day she had me out reading in her garden. She had a lovely garden. Lynn Bridge had this 3-tier yard where the first tier was the patio, the second tier was the pool and the hot tub, and the third tier was flowers and things. And I tried to help her weed, but I pointed out that she'd have to identify the weed every time. So I was I am so very, very, very glad that Lynn knew she had been elected to the Hall of Fame before she died. It was something that meant so very much to her. I can't even talk about it. Bill said Lynn moved to Washington. The way she moved to Washington was that my partner and roommate Ray and I had met her at the Norfolk Nationals in 1979. First Nationals for all of us. And we all hit it off. And Lynn came up to visit for a week and stayed for a year and a half. So that's how Lynn ended up in Washington. And it was wonderful because Ray and I were working and we'd come home and Lynn would have dinner on the stove. It was just fantastic. For those of you who didn't know Lynn, she was a really, really wonderful person. And I will miss her for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The thing that I remember about Lynn is she was a very natural player, always had never problems, just playing the card was always right. And of course, she always had a dog or two or three on her lap while she was doing it. Okay, now, we're going to do something before Larry. This is before Larry. It's Marty, because Marty comes before Larry. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me in the last 20 years and said, "You're Marty Bergen, right?" I said, "Not exactly." They said, "No, you're Marty Bergen. You play with Larry Cohen." Not exactly. At any rate, before Larry gets inducted himself, he will have the honor of inducting his old pal, Marty Bergen, who, between the two of them, revolutionized bridge. Now, while he's doing that, I have to take a vote of hands. I have two speeches here. One says roast, and one says toast. Sorry, Larry. But I can't help it. You want to send Maria out the room? All right, at any rate, my old buddy Larry is going to introduce his old pal, Marty Bergen.
Okay, thank you. So, let me tell you a little bit about Marty Bergen, who I've known forever. And I'm so excited that he got voted into the Hall of Fame, long overdue. First time I ever saw Marty, I was a teenager, and I had heard of Marty Bergen, and I went to a tournament that decided to kibitz. And I walked in, and I sat down behind Marty, who was quite an imposing figure. Back then, he was kind of big, and he just was like a very noticeable kind of figure in the room. And I sat down behind him on the very first deal. He had 5 clubs to the jack and nothing else. And he was in third seat, favorable vulnerability, pass to him. And as I later learned from him, he had an expression among his many expressions: third seat, favorable, is not bridge. That was one of his expressions, and sure enough, he opened the bidding 3 clubs. I was astonished. This was in the 1970s, and I had learned that to open 3 clubs, you'd have 7 good clubs, not 5 to the jack. And it worked out well, and the rest is kind of history. We all know that Marty was one of the pioneers of the kind of annoying, reckless preempting that has now become fairly routine in the bridge world. But he was well ahead of his time in that disruptive bidding. Now, I think a lot of you associate me with the love of total tricks, but if you really know the history, it was Marty who first brought it to prominence in this country. He read about it, and he loved it. He taught it to me, and when we were partners, we relied on it all of the time. And so many of the bids we use today are based on it. Certainly Bergen raises are based on getting to the 3 level with 9 trump. And there's so many things in bridge bidding today that we all do routinely, like 1 heart, take out double, 3 hearts because we have 9 trumps and it's weak. So many of these theories are because of Marty. He really did revolutionize the competitive bidding. Okay, so Marty, I think, deserves this honor and has long deserved it on so many levels, certainly as a player, as a teacher, as a writer. I mean, Points is the best books on bridge, one of the most famous books, and most of all, as an innovator. He really did change the game and the way we bid. Now, Marty couldn't be here tonight, so we're going to play a recording from him, but he did want me to tell everyone, not just thank you to all of you for being here, but also to congratulate the other recipients of awards tonight. So I think we're going to roll the tape of Marty, and I think you'll be seeing me soon, I hope. Okay.
I was pleased to learn that I had been voted into the Bridge Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, I have severe issues with my back, so traveling to Providence was out of the question. I want to thank those who chose to vote for me. In addition, there definitely are a few others who I'd like to thank. First, of course, for her help and patience in putting up with me over the years, my wonderful wife, Cheryl. Next is my longtime friend, Richard Oshlag, who arranged for me to begin writing a monthly column in the ACBL Bulletin in 1976. In addition, over the years, Richard has also helped me greatly in many other ways. The many students and friends who have edited my books and booklets have also been great. Number one of those is my good friend, Fran Fryman, who also helped me greatly with organizing classes. Another good friend is Howard Schutzman, who invented the wonderful process that led to our very popular interactive AV online lessons. Last, but definitely not least, is Larry Cohen, my good friend of 45 plus years, and without question, my favorite partner. Thanks very much, Larry, for all you have done for me over the years. I began playing seriously in the late 1970s and chose to leave the tournament scene in the early 90s, so I had a very short playing career. I do want to thank Larry for his very generous comments in the March 20th Daily Bulletin in Reno, where he compared my short playing career to that of legendary baseball pitcher Sandy Koufax. It is true that we both had brief, successful careers. It's also true that we have the same religious affiliation. Alas, in all other respects, comparing me and my modest achievements to those of one of the greatest pitchers in baseball history qualifies as a significant overbid. I would like to believe that over the years, I have made significant contributions to bridge with my conventions and writing. I am a teacher at heart, so I've tried hard to improve bidding knowledge and techniques for players of all levels. Unfortunately, in this point count, our everything world we live in, most of my ideas on hand evaluation have fallen on deaf ears. Oh well, bridge is the best game of all, and I love it. Not a day has gone by in the last 60 years that I haven't thought about bidding and card play. Although I'm content to limit my playing these days to occasional forays on BBO, I know that my obsession with this game will never change. I hope everyone has a good tournament. Best wishes, and most importantly, please stay safe.
Congratulations, Marty, well deserved. comes for the last time. I've been left a note from some anonymous person here. It says, if your son wants a job tomorrow, forget about the roast and go with the toast. I mean, I don't know. I'm being threatened. But I don't know how many of you people know that my son Mike teaches with Bridge with Larry. Did you do that video? He did the video with Marty, so if you like it, it's Mike's. If you don't like it, what? Anyway, Larry and I go way back. He came to me and said, I got to know what kind of partner you're going to be. I grew up with Ron Gerard. When Ron Gerard opened 2 spades, he had the king, the queen, the jack, and the 10, the 9, and the 8, and maybe a few more. Okay? And then I saw him play with Marty Bergen, and we opened 2 spades. The opponents could make 6 spades, which was true. And he says, which one are you? And I said, which one do you want to be? Which one do you want me to be? And he said, be yourself. I just need to know what you're going to have. That's all I want to know. That's all he wanted to know was what he could rely on me. So I said, well, I'm not going to be like Ron, and I'm not going to be like Marty. I'll be somewhere in between. Of course, you could drive a truck in between those two. At any rate, it's interesting that we're here in Providence, which is near Boston. Larry's first major triumph, 1980 Spingle. He won with Ron Gerard, Stauber, Rosner, and Sutherlin, and Ralph Katz. Is Ralph here? Well then, and Sutherlin. And Ralph. They won. That was his first foray into Major League Bridge. Since then, his record is, of course, impeccable, and, well, thankfully, I was there to see some of them. I was making a list of things that I could talk about here tonight, and then my wife came to me and said, you can't say that. And then my kids, who are both here, said, no. And then Maria actually threatened me. That's his lovely book. Okay? So I'm told that I'm supposed to limit myself to the weather in Utah and the Yankees. Are the Yankees win tonight? He's taking me. That's right. If you want to get on Larry's bad side, tell him the Yankees score. If you want to really get on his bad side, tell him the Jets score. But we don't discuss the Jets anymore because being a Jet fan is, after all, a lifetime of misery and suffering. We all love it. Okay, Larry, playing with him, it's a terrific honor. You knew that when he would go into a study, no matter what happened, he would always get it right. I mean, you could wait for 2 or 3 minutes, he would invariably play the card that you wanted him to play. He would always make the bid that you wanted him to bid. He was unbelievable, uncanny. And I can't believe he's left Bridge so that he wants to teach all these people how to beat our brains in. He's teaching them how to play, he's teaching them how to bid, he's teaching them, he's got these webinars and seminars and cruises and this and that. And in fact, I just recently heard that his biggest, actually his greatest achievement in life has just come through. I just heard, and you'll have to take it from me, this is big. Nothing to do with Bridge. He has just taken over the lead in the South Florida Bridge Players Golf Tour. Money Lifetime won. I'm told that he's moved into the lead. It's really unfair because he plays all his rounds with our friend Victor, and he gets paid in zlotys. It doesn't seem fair, but he's moved into the league. I won't tell you who he passed. And I'm really annoyed at this, but I think since his golf game is getting better, and all the rest of ours, except for maybe Gary and Michael, are getting I'm getting worse, I know that. But his pride and joy is his golf game. So the fact that he is a career money leader on our little tour, Jones isn't on tour, we won't discuss your statistics because it could be in trouble. Excuse me? He's ahead of me this year. Is that true, Michael? Yes. There you go. Okay, so let me tell you a little story about Larry and how one of the reasons he won as much as he did. There are people who win more than they should and people who don't win as much as they should. Larry was always an overachiever. Everybody was rooting for him. And the best thing I can tell you about that was we were playing in a regional in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Any of you been in Hot Springs, Arkansas? Okay, we're playing in a regional. We're playing these two nice ladies. And on the first hand, we play 4 spades, and the spades split something, and we go down. And the next hand, we play 3 hearts and go down there. And then we save, and we go for 500, 5 diamonds doubled. And this goes on for 5 boards. And on the 6th board, we're 1-no trump. 1-no trump. And somehow or the other, we eke out 7 tricks. And the lady gives the biggest, beaming, sweet smile ever. And I look at her and I say, can you tell me why you're so happy? She says, oh, you boys are so nice. I was afraid if you went down one more time, you'd get fired. It's a true story. You can verify it? There you go. We never made a contract. At any rate, everybody rooted for Larry. I mean, we would come to an end of a pair game, and I felt bad for the people we played at the end. We would be sitting there, and he would have like 30 or 40 kibitzers, and they were all rooting like heck for us to win. And the people just wanted to finish playing and get out of Dodge. They just said, here, take all the tricks. So if anybody came to us at the end and said, how'd you do on the last round or two? We say, well, we got all tops because nobody wanted to play us. They just wanted us to win and leave. Okay? He was like a perfect partner. He would just sit there. He would never complain about me. He wouldn't let me complain about him. If I did, he would. And he trained me to be a very good partner. And more important than being a good partner, he wanted us to be really well respected and liked at the bridge table. But more important than at the bridge table was what he meant to my family. Not a week went by where Uncle Larry would show up at our house, and both my kids, to this day, will tell you, they wish he was their father. They will both tell you. However, one day, Mike came home and said, we almost lost Anna in a white water rafting incident, but Larry saved her. She was about 8. And I said, okay, don't tell Mom. And then, a little while later, we come home from Gatlinburg. And what would you bring home from Gatlinburg for the kids? Fireworks. Okay, we brought home fireworks and fireworks. My wife looked at me and she says, I'm going to kill you. And I said, Larry brought it. She said, I'm going to kill you. Okay, so what else can I say about Larry? He's everything that's good about bridge. He's everything that's good for bridge. Everyone in the room is like, he says that Marty did the law of total tricks. Yes, Marty did the law of total tricks. Marty was one of the instigators, but Larry wrote the book, the law of total tricks. It's in his 2nd or 3rd version. He's also written millions of books. He's taught my son how to write. I'd like to think that I had a little something to do with helping him write. Of course, he traded with me on the floor of the stock exchange for 15 years, 20 years. And I think we worked on our partnership maybe 2 or 3 days. And that was it. We just traded and we played bridge, and he's the best buddy anybody can have. And he's got Maria, and they're in Utah, and life is good. So, come on up.
Thank you. This is so special to me, and I got off easy. David could have been so much meaner. So. Thank you, David. Well, there are so many people here to thank, and I'm not going to name too many names, but the two sitting next to me I just want to start with. And a lot of you know, since the last 20 years I've been doing bridge cruises and teaching, and you know who's with me every time, and she's been a big part of my career. And then the other person sitting next to me, let me give you a little bit of background. I learned bridge when I was 6 from my grandparents. And if they could be here tonight, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, they were incredible. Fortunately, they lived long enough to see my success in bridge, and they were so proud of me. You didn't want to be their neighbors that would hear the stories. But they taught me bridge when I was 6, and we had a 4th, who was my older brother. He was 10 at the time, and he's a very good player. He's been my best friend, and we're so close. My brother Paul Cohen, stand up. But I mean, really, everyone here, just about. I mean, I have teammates and partners, the Hall of Fame committee, all the people who voted. My people that I do the cruises with, the staff and the travel agency that I've been working with now for 20 years. Well, so many people here, friends, people I golf with that were mentioned. It's just like they're all here, and I'm so honored. But I kind of want to conclude with what's the most important part of bridge for me. And there's 2 tables over here. And at those 2 tables are players who have been on cruises with me, students. And that's what I live for now with bridge, the thrill of teaching and having people have a good time at bridge. I've just enjoyed that more than my career as a player. And it's so special to me to enjoy that part of bridge and getting people interested in the game and loving the game. And I love this game. It's been my life. This is such an honor. I've been waiting for it for a long time, and then I had to wait 3 more years to be up here because of COVID. But it's really special, and I thank all of you sincerely for being here to share it with me tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, before we wrap up, I have to tell you something. Larry, I don't know how many people know this, he is an antisocial creature. If anybody's thinking of inviting him to weddings, bar mitzvahs, brises, anything of that nature, call my son Michael and he'll respond to Larry. He also says that if I didn't finish by 9 o'clock, he was leaving. And it's a couple minutes to 9, so thank you all for coming.